Thank you so much for joining me, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to, obviously you do such amazing work. So excited to be here with you and with your different clients and people. It's so fun to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to just give an introduction to everyone who's here, and then for all of those who are going to join us on the recording. So Hannah Moore is a CFP, and she's a numbers loving creative, and she's the owner of the financial planning firm Guiding Wealth and creator of the Budgeting Blocks. She's also looking to improve the ways that people experience and engage with their money. On top of her financial planning work and pushing to change the way people budget, Hannah also consults with the FPA, Financial Planning Association, on new planner initiatives. As a financial planner, she's dedicated to helping clients understand their money in a new way. She's also committed to supporting the next generation of planners to ensure the profession moves forward to meet the needs of a new generation. She definitely has done that for me through the financial planning externship that she hosted and taught over the summer. And, it was such a great program. And I loved it so much and learned so much from you, and also just had such a great experience overall with it, and feel so encouraged and inspired, too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and then I'm gonna open it up to others, who will have other questions as well. So first, why did you want to be a financial planner, and why you started your own company?
Yeah, so I had no idea this was even a job option. And so I remember, how you have the money shows on the radio? So I remember being in high school with my $750 car that I bought, driving around and listening to the money shows, just driving around because I loved it so much. And I never connected that was just a passion of mine. I always figured I'd do something in the evenings, some volunteer somewhere to help with some budget mentoring or something. But I remember driving around, even as a high schooler or teenager, and hearing the answers that people were giving on the radio talk shows. And I just remember being like, don't they remember there's a person there? Don't they connect this? You're not just talking to a spreadsheet, you're talking to a person. And I don't know, and all of the answers that I heard, I was just like, there's something missing here. So I got into college. I wanted to do nonprofit management, just wanted to help people, and kind of went down that track and then fell into financial planning. And so that's kind of how I got here. Growing up, I didn't know anybody who needed to have a college degree to do their job except for teachers. And so it was a very different experience for me coming out of college, because I was just expecting to make $12 an hour the rest of my life, because that's really what I had seen. And so I kind of fell into some opportunities, and I was just maybe a little bit naive and didn't know how to say no. But I ended up working for another woman who was a financial planner, and I ended up buying her practice 4 years in. So I was 22, she was 68, and 4 years later I bought her business and realized that I love financial planning, but I also love being a business owner and being an entrepreneur, and realizing that, in the course of this, I know I said I'm a number loving creative, really recognizing that that creative side of me comes out in that business owner side, that comes out in the financial planning that I do. And so it's been just a really cool mixture for me.
That's awesome. How did you start, and why did you start your own firm?
Yeah, well, it was really just an opportunity to do this. One of the things where it was at before was very investment heavy. So we would have clients come in, and we would give them these binders of all of the different reports and stuff that they had. Nobody wanted to read it. I didn't want to read it. It was so terrible. And then I really discovered what financial planning was versus just the traditional investment management. And that's what I fell in love with. And that's what I was like, this is what I want to do, because you can really impact people's lives. Really, a lot of the work you're doing, Katie, with really, how do you connect people's money with their values? How do you help people tell a different story about their money? How do you help people, I always say my goal in life is to change the way people think and talk about money. And so that's, I realized there's so much more than just investments. And yes, investments are a tool, and it's a great tool, and lots of expertise in that, but I really wanted to focus on the financial planning piece. And so over the course of some time, I bought these practices, and then I ended up transitioning kind of where I was at. working with fewer people, but being much more intentional and like working much deeper with the people that I was working with.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's what I love about your work is that you're also very values driven, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah. And so what are some of your guiding principles or values when it comes to building a financial future?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's so funny. We always do like a values exercise with my clients, and like it literally is like on a sticky note on my computer screen. So I'm like, oh, I can just pull this right out. But you know, a lot of for me, like when I look at this, meaningful work is my top value. Like it's really important to me, and these are just my values in life. And but one of the things I always say is like your values in life are going to be your values in money. Like they should be aligned. Like yeah. Like Katie's like yes, exactly. But like meaningful work, like I want to do work that's an impact. Creativity is a huge thing for me. I feel so alive when I'm coming up with new things. Like the externship program, like it was so much fun because we were able to like create something new. So like that's always a big driver for me. I can tell when I'm not creating things. You know, family is really important to me. So I have a 2-year-old little girl. My husband works with me full time. He doesn't do financial planning. He does media production stuff, but Ed, he has an education background too. But he works with me full time. We have a nursery at our office for our two-year-old little girl. So we've really been able to kind of incorporate our work with our life and our family. So we've seen that for us. The significance and wisdom, like I want to be really wise with what we want to do. I want to have impact. You know, it's I always think whenever I think of wisdom, the phrase like a fool is wise in his own eyes. So I'm not saying that I have it, but I strive for it. And I want to be just really, you know, knowing that there's always stuff that I don't know. It's very humbling side of it. And then freedom. I love to be able to have the flexibility. That's really important to us.
That's so cool. I think freedom, freedom is definitely one of my top values, and probably for the majority of my clients, like freedom is definitely in their top 10 values. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, when when we're talking about investing, we can also be investing with our values, right? What's your take on investing with your values, and then also socially responsible investing?
Oh my goodness. I love the idea of socially responsible investing. And it's been really interesting. So like wealth management and financial planning is behind the times on this. Like, I think it's fair to say that. And so we're definitely trying to catch up. Most 75% of my clients, new clients now, are asking about it. And so we've been exploring it a lot more of what does this look like? And then how do we match? So I think it's a great tool and a great way just to align. You know, so much of what's happening, there's so many issues in our world that I feel powerless about. Like, I'm just like, what can I do? And so to be able to be like, oh, I can just weave this into my life, into my investing, things that I'm already going to do, it makes so much sense to me and how we're doing that. We have a long way to go in how do we, I don't want to say commoditize it, but how do we make that really easy for people? So there's some really great solutions out there right now. What we're finding struggles with is like what's important to me may be a little bit different than what's important to Katie. And then how do you change the investment strategy around that? And I was just telling somebody recently, like the latest, like the last 10 years in my field, it's all been how do we systematize and streamline all the investments so it's really easy. But now with socially responsible investing, I think the trend's going to be the exact opposite. What is it going to look like for us to build custom portfolios, to really say, like, really dive deep into being like, what is Hannah value? What's most important to Hannah, and then how can we reflect that into your investments in a meaningful way? Because if you're going to do the work of doing it, like you want to have impact. Like you don't want to just be like, this isn't just a check the box type thing. This is like, if you're going to do it, you want to do it well and do it right. And so there's some really, really great options out there. The costs are coming down tremendously on those, which is really, from a financial planning standpoint, that's always something I'm aware of and looking at. I think it's just a really, really cool way of doing it.
That is so awesome to hear, because I really think that it needs to be more tailored to the individual and what their values are and what it represents for them, because that's like one of the things that I've talked about this with you and then with my clients, is that like over the summer after the externship, I actually fired my financial planner, and mainly because it was just so cookie cutter, and it really didn't make it individual and for what I needed and for the way my husband and I think about doing things. And in fact, I got a little bit more pushback when it was like, okay, my family's from Taiwan. We're not very much we don't buy things made in China as much as possible. That's one of our values. Yeah. And, so I didn't really want to be invested in China or a lot of the Chinese companies and products, and I got a lot of pushback against it. So I really love hearing that you and some other firms are really thinking about making investments very tailored to your clients. That's awesome.
Yeah, we talk about this idea of fiduciary, and it's like basically you do it, your clients come first, and we can do that from like a legal standpoint, but like so much of the client relationship, like is it about me and my efficiencies, or is it about helping my client with what they need? And those are two different things, and it's always something, we're not moving as fast as I would like, but we're in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. So, in your bio, I talked about the building blocks, right?
Yes.
And the budget blocks. And, you have this unique way of visually representing the financial future for your clients. Like, do you have them?
Yes, I have them with me. Let me, I'll show you. Well, let me tell you the story if that's okay.
Yes.
So I'm like traditionally trained as a financial planner. And so a lot of financial planners, bless us, like we basically are like, our clients don't have money budgeting problems. Yes, they do. Everybody does. But it was really like, here's what you do. You do a spreadsheet with them, and then like, that's what you work through this. And I realized the more and more I was doing it with my clients, number one, nobody enjoyed that meeting. It was pretty painful. Like nobody wanted to come to it. And number two, there was no action taken from it. So I stopped doing it because I was like, I don't have time for this. The clients don't like it. And it was basically like, I was being like, that's not my responsibility. You go figure out your budget. You come back and invest money with me. Like that was kind of the mentality. And it just never fit right. And so anyway, I had these two clients that this couple that came to me, and they were, very successful, made a lot of money. They were just like, we have no idea where our money goes. They're like, we need budgeting help. And I was like, okay, like this is crazy. Like if as a financial planner, I can't help with their budget, like something's wrong. And so one of a financial psychologist told me a while back, anything you can tell, you can show. And I realized that with budgeting, all we were doing is we're telling clients how to do it. We weren't actually showing them anything. And so I ended up going to this learning store. So an adult, or not adult learning store, and just a normal like teacher store. Yeah. And I ended up getting, they were different than this, but I ended up getting these blocks for like kids learn fractions on. I never learned fractions on them, but like kids learn fractions on them. And so with these blocks, I ended up buying a set or two of them. And so I go into this client meeting and I was like, y'all, I've never done this before. We're just gonna try it. And I gave for them each block is a certain dollar amount for everybody. So they had a certain dollar amount. And then we set out a bunch of these on the table. So I got a visual for the whole, like, this is how much money you bring in every month. And then I had them, they had to pull out how much money did they actually spend. And so we ended up mapping it across the table. And so we have these little table tents. Now they're all like made and like cute. But we had these table tents. And so it was like a piece of paper that I was just folding up. But we went through and we showed where their money was going. And what was so cool was they started to make all these connections about their money that they would never have made in a spreadsheet. So the wife in this story, she had her mortgage in the housing part of the budget. And standing up, like fully engaged in looking at their budget, she like laughing, having fun, things you don't normally associate with budgeting. She ended up grabbing her mortgage. She was looking at everything on the table. She grabbed her mortgage and she put it over to her other debt and just said, oh my God, is that how much money we're paying in debt payments every month? And I was like, yes, that's how much you're doing it. And she was just like, oh, like we have to stop. And then she did. Like that was the crazy thing about it. And so it was so cool because they got to actually start seeing their money. So instead of trying to figure out, oh, we're $438 over budget this month, like what does that mean? So this couple also did go over budget. So it's a different color. We gave them red. You can immediately see visually where you've gone over your budget. And like, there's no shame in any of this. Like, it's just more of like, this is, this is just how you spent your money. But it's so much easier to be like, oh, I need 7 blocks. Where are they going to come from? Versus we have to cut $438. Where's this money going to come from? And then like, how are we going to reallocate it? And so it was just one of the coolest experiences that I've seen with my clients. And so I started doing it with more and more of my clients. And everybody discovered something a little bit different about their money, but everybody discovered something by just being able to visually see their money like on the table and see their budget. Because I mean, I'm a financial planner, like I do love spreadsheets, but like seeing my money this way makes it come alive in a way that spreadsheets just doesn't. And my husband and I can have conversations that we just don't have normally.
Yeah.
And so much of what we were talking about earlier, Katie, doing the values exercise is so we have, I'll show you the whole setup here in a minute, but we have this little workbook that takes people through how to do it. And one of the first steps we do is have them actually do a values exercise themselves. So you come up with your own values, and then it's like you're looking at your money. How did you spend your money according to your values? Because every dollar you spend is enforcing some value, right? Hopefully they're values that you want to be doing, but sometimes it's not, And so it's a great way of kind of just rethinking through your money. And so then once you kind of see how you did spend your money, then you can rearrange how do you want to spend your money going forward. And we found that just especially with couples, being able to be on the same page really was helpful. But even our single clients really got a lot out of this.
It's so cool. Yeah. And I know that, a lot of people are much more visual, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So much of what's being taught in personal finance, and I was guilty of this too when we were doing our budget. It's somebody was like, this is what I did. I'm good with numbers, so do what I did. And it's like that's what we're taught. And it's like, no. Like I always tell financial planners, like your clients will be your greatest teachers. And like my clients were telling me, maybe not directly in these words, they're telling me that like what we were doing with their budgeting wasn't working. They're like, this isn't how I learn. This isn't how I engage. This isn't how I think about things. And so instead of being like, oh, the client's wrong, it's more of like, no, like there's new ways that we can explore and like really look at this, because at the end of the day, like that's what matters. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong in how I approach it. It's more of like, are you getting what you need? Are you aligning your money with your values? Are you being intentional with how you're spending your money? Because that's the most important thing.
That's cool. And do you ever use this for like kids? Because obviously like there's some connection to Legos with.
Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah, well, it's really funny. I have a client who has like an 8-year-old, and she was like, you need to do this with my 8-year-old son. And I was like, okay. I was like, I have a 2-year-old. I'm not there yet. But we've talked about that. We've talked about getting into schools. And we're going to be we're doing some prototypes with some high schoolers right now of doing like student loans and figuring out like how much student loans with the blocks. So kind of reimagining kind of what some of that would look like. So that's coming, but we're not, yeah, but I love the idea of doing it with kids as well.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did this workshop and I gave them real budgets, and I gave real budgets and had people do the blocks to kind of, and then I asked them what were the values that they learned. So so I gave them my budget. They didn't know this, but I gave them my own budget just to see what they would say. And it was so funny because both my husband and I are busy professionals with a 2-year-old, and like life is crazy. And it was so funny. One lady's observation was, they don't have a lot of fun in their life. And I was like, now you're getting a little too personal. But it was just so interesting, even reflecting on it. She was like, they eat out a lot. And she's like, and they have all this high childcare. She's like, I don't think that they're like, it was such a cool like exercise in hearing them say that, because I was like, you know what, you're right. We don't have enough fun in our budget right now. Like we're just trying to keep our heads above water. And when at that time, and so it's just really, I don't know, there's just a lot, and life changes a lot. So figuring out what that looks like and staying on top of it. So
yeah, you can really tell a lot about people and their values and their personalities and what they do and don't do in their lives based off of what that looks like. And
one of the things, so this is like the packaging, like it's everyday money budgeting blocks. One of our big taglines is that every budget has a story. Let's bring yours to life. And it's like every budget should look different. Like we don't want it, there's not like this cookie cutter, here's what it is. It's like it should be different because we all value things differently.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, the movie. When she goes in to talk to this like mobster guy, right? Like in jail, he goes through her budget and then he talks about that. He talks about how the stories that I can tell from, just looking at, this thing. And then and she was like, oh, must be good for a laugh. And he's like, oh no, this is really sad. Cool. Okay, so I want to open it up to clients and to now ask any questions that they may have. Anybody who wants to come on, please come on video if you can, and then we can ask Hannah your questions. I think I'm gonna just pick somebody to start. Martine, you're muted actually, so you'll unmute yourself.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. How do we get, I saw that green box that you have. How do we get a hold of those? And the other one is, you talked about student loans. Any chance that you see that the government might come up with sort of forgiveness in the future?
Oh man, it's been so interesting. Okay, so I'm just gonna put this in the chat here. So this is where the blocks are.
Cool.
It's so interesting because I've been reading a lot more even this week about some of the student loan plans that are out there, and figuring them out of like what's going to happen, and it looks like what I'm reading is, a lot of the Biden proposal or what he's trying to get Congress to pass. Apparently he's not wanting to do the executive order to do it. It's looking at like about $10,000 is what he's looking at doing. So it's the first time that I've been like, I really think it might actually happen. It might be realistic. And so it'll be really, really interesting to see how it plays out. And then as with so many of these things, like the devil's in the details, like what types of loans are going to get forgiven, what's not going to be forgiven. It'll be a very, very interesting side of it. So we have just like this blanket, like, I mean, $10,000 is the number that I'm seeing. I was seeing 30,000 before, but now 10,000 is what I'm reading. The other piece that I think is going to be really interesting is a public loan forgiveness program, and how like their acceptance rate for that. Because once you reach 10 years, they're going to forgive your loan. I'll be really, really curious to see if the Biden administration makes that easier, because there was so much confusion around it. Like so many people, like you would submit your form in and you had no idea, like, does this count for it or not? And putting a decade of your life into something for like, that's a big deal. And so I'm really hopeful that we get a lot more clarity on that piece as well.
I'm hoping it's more than 10,000, right? 10,000 is so little.
I know that was part of the thing that I was, when I was thinking about, I was talking to somebody and I was like, when you think about the people who are really like under the burden of these student loans, it's not $10,000. Like it's a lot more than that.
$200,000.
Yeah. Like it's, so and again, I'm certainly not the public policy expert or anything, but I'm like, can we look at bankruptcy for student loans? Can we look at, some other options that, it's been like taxes and student loans, and there's like one other thing that you can't get rid of in bankruptcy. But could we maybe align some of this interest between the universities and the lenders with the students? I don't know. It'll be really interesting. But when I think of the larger problem, I think, it's not a $10,000 fix per person. It could be like, could we go through bankruptcy? And you have that on your record, and nobody wants to do that. But man, the options are hard for some people.
Yeah, I have a couple of student loans with different institutions, and one of them is part of the CARES Act. The other one is not. And the one I called the one that is not, and I asked them whether they would participate if the government forgives the loans. And she stated that because they're federal loans, but they're privately funded, and therefore most likely would not participate in a forgiveness loan. And so I was thinking, maybe I should just consolidate with the one that actually is part of the CARES Act, whose loan that has my loan with the Department of Education directly. And so, thinking that best to put myself in the position, whereas if there's a forgiveness, then that they can participate instead of, yeah, they forgave it, but no, we're not gonna take part of it. So sorry, you still owe us. So.
Yeah. And a lot of this is where they're really gonna have to figure out some of this, like the planning side of it. I know, like, I don't know if you're doing the public loan forgiveness program, but as you know, consolidating can really throw a wrench into some of these things. So it's definitely something that you want to like check into to make sure that like you wouldn't lose other benefits or other protections. But yeah, but again, we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah,
Nobody's seen actual language of a bill. Like,
right.
We're all flying blind. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you have any other questions, Martine?
Well, sure. I have two other questions. Hey, what do you have you ever run into, or do you have experience with? So let's say you have a couple of credit cards, and negotiating a payment with the credit of those credit cards for a lower amount. I looked up a couple of answers on the internet and spoke with one of those places that helps you with that, and he was saying, yeah, you got to be 6 months late on your cards before they consider negotiating with you. Otherwise, they won't, and the negotiation, you can do it yourself or with them, and usually it's 50 to 60%. But I have also heard that just do it as soon as possible. What's your take on that?
So a couple thoughts on it. So one is, when you do the negotiation, it does ding your credit report. And so thoughts I would have is making sure that you're not going to need your credit, and obviously we can't always predict that, but making sure that like buying a house isn't in your near future, or buying a car or something that you're going to need on that. So that would be my first just like thing just to keep in mind on that, because that can be a big factor. And you want to make really wise, steps as you're navigating this, and you don't want to hamstring yourself. The other side of it, I haven't negotiated them myself or helped clients do it myself. But the thing that I always think is, you're in a powerful position if you're negotiating with them, and like to not forget that. I think, a lot of people, like if you're ready to pay them off, like, or, you're ready to renegotiate on that, like, you don't have to accept the first offer. It's just some of that negotiation piece. I think people get very, it's very fearful. Like it's very, and I think don't forget that you're in a powerful position in that negotiation table. Because unlike student loans, like you're like, not that you're gonna do this, but you could just file bankruptcy and then they're out everything.
Can I say something about the?
Oh, please, yes.
About the fear is, and I have also thought this myself, because you also read on the internet that they can sue you, but I don't know at what point when they can sue you, but I know that that's part of that's what they do, and so that's also been on my mind. Geez, I don't want them to sue me, right? but I don't know. I've heard about charge-offs that they can sue you, and the other part of it is the negotiation. I mean, when can they sue you?
Well, and especially if you go into, and what they don't want to happen is they don't want you to be like piling up the credit card debt and putting it in a bank account and making lots of money off that bank account, and so I think if there was to be like a lawsuit, that would be the most logical thing to me, of being like, you're taking our money and you're just putting it in this bank account, and then you're going to try to settle for us for half of it. You're going to put $50,000 on a credit card. You're going to settle for $25,000, but you have $50,000 in a bank. That would be that would make sense to me from like a lawsuit standpoint. But for a lot of, I wish it wasn't this hard. I know that's not the answer that you're looking for, but like, it's just, these are huge companies and it's very intimidating going up against them. But, and I think a lot of this too is, if you do negotiate with them, have them put it in writing. Have it put it in writing that you're like, this is going to be the final thing. It's the final thing that I hear from you. Like, it's the final, that there is no other action that you can do against me. I think that is something to consider as well.
Okay. Cool. Well, since I have you here,
yeah,
I understand. So you as a financial planner, you have take the CFP test, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you heard or run into, or maybe one of your colleagues, about the CFA?
Mm-hmm.
And, because I really like investments,
Yeah.
and but I know there's 3 tests, and it's a long, but for the knowledge, honestly, to understand it even more myself,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever I do with, as a job in the future, that's something else. But my interest is in investments. But
yeah, so CFA is a great designation. It's hard. I don't know that I could do it. Like, it's I have some friends that are doing it and they love it, and I can follow some of their so that's just my own bias. So that's but it gets way technical. So a lot of the CFA, I think there's one of the tests that's actually on like investments from like a stock market standpoint. A lot of what else it focuses on is being able to run the financials of an existing company. So a lot of CFAs, so some CFAs work in like the stock market type space, but a lot of CFAs work directly with companies in understanding like their balance sheet and things like that. So I believe, and again, this is from what I have 2 friends going through it right now, what they were telling me, they're like, one test is like really focused on like related to what I do in helping people invest. The other ones are much more focused on the financial management of like large companies. So it'll absolutely differentiate you in terms of like the job market. But there are some other designations. Let me see. I'm going to Google this really quick, make sure. Yeah, there's a lot of other designations. I want to say the SEMA, but I don't think that's right. Yeah, so it's investmentsandwealth.org. So it's here. I'll put this link in the chat. So this one it's a certified investment management analysis. So the barrier is going to be a lot lower on how to get that, but that would be one to consider looking at. The other ones that are out there, there's a number of investment ones that are at a little bit of a different, they're good like ones leading up to that, if that makes sense. So the SEMA would be one that is like, people recognize it and can look at that. And it's also depending what you want to use on it. So like if you wanted to do like high net worth, like if you're wanting to get into financial planning, there's some different designations for different pieces. So like even what Katie was talking about, like the socially responsible investing, I think there's a new certification out there just for that. And so, or if you want to do more of just like, high net worth or ultra high net worth folks, there's designations out there for that. But another good place would be like the American College. They're coming out with a number of designations. If you want to do like retirement income or retirement, like how do you do investments in retirement, they have a number of designations out there as well. So there's, the CFA is a great one, but there's some that are like maybe a little bit more attainable. They're not 3 tests. They're not like dedicate your life for 3 years for this thing, that can get you more of like the practical knowledge of what we're doing.
Cool. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay.
See a couple of people had to jump off, but Laura, I don't know if you have any questions you'd like to ask.
Yeah, I'm not going to turn on my camera right now, but I do have a question.
Yeah,
sure.
I came a little late, so I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but I went through your website. Oh, and hi, by the way, thanks for doing this. And you talk about helping couples have better conversations about money. So I'm curious to know what those conversations are. And I know that's sort of general, but I mean, I have my own conversations with myself, about money. And I started this year more when I started working with Katie. But I also just want to have these conversations with my partner. And I have been throughout the year because, I have these conversations with Katie. And so they bleed into my relationship. But I also want to build wealth together with my partner. And the conversations that I have with Katie are more so to look at myself. So I'm just wondering, as this new year begins, like what the conversations with my partner should look like or can look like.
Oh my gosh, I love this question so much. You don't even know. Okay, so many thoughts on this. And so the first one is, so one of the exercises that I do with a lot of my clients is a communication preferences exercise. And it is literally, how do you want to talk about money? And I know that sounds real basic, but it's incredibly helpful for me as a professional working with clients because nobody's ever taught how to work with money. And the fact that you're working with Katie, you're already like light years ahead of most people. But we're not taught how to have these conversations. And then when we start having these conversations, we all operate a little bit differently around them. And so this communication exercise, so my husband and I did it together. And so I'm a financial planner and like, we're still a mess. So, we're still like getting fights about money, but it was really interesting because I had him do it. I had him do this exercise and I did the exercise myself. And one of them was on his communication preferences, he was like, get to the point. And mine was like, I need time to process my response. Like, I can't make money decisions immediately. Like, that's just not how I'm wired. And so what was happening were a lot of our disagreements were coming in where we were sitting down to have these money budgeting conversations. And I'm like ready to talk it out and he's ready to make a decision. And so we were just like missing each other. And so we were both really frustrated with this. And so what we learned in that process was that what I do is I'm the one who pulls together our budget numbers and I'll even write it out sometimes. And I like on a sheet of paper, write it out because it's just like the pace that my brain needs to work through what we're doing. And so I'll like write it out or I'll be able to sit on it a couple of days because that's what I need. And so then when we're actually getting to the point where we're sitting down to have these money conversations, we're both ready to make decisions at the same time. And so it's been a really powerful tool in thinking through some of those pieces. Some of my clients, other things that matter to them, a lot of my clients are just get to the bottom line. Like some people want to really understand the process of how do we get to budget decisions? How are we getting to, okay, so end of the year, if you're going to put money into like a retirement account, like a lot of people are thinking about this right now. Like my husband is just like, tell me what to do. Like, I don't want to think about this. And I'm the financial planner. So I'm like the analyst and I'm like, well, if we do this, if we do this. And he's like, I don't want to hear, like we just operate and we think very differently about it. Mm-hmm. And so by us understanding how the other one thinks, we're able to, he doesn't care about the process. He's like, tell me what I need to do and the benefit of it. And like, we're good. Some people are very visual. Some people are, and so getting a sense of what those are about your partner is going to help with those money conversations. So we call that the communication preferences piece of it. So that's always the first step. I always say people start their money conversations on the numbers, and it's missing the point. You have to start several steps before. So it's the communication preferences, and then it's going to the values that Katie was talking about. It sounds like you guys have probably all worked through those, but what are your values? And then how does that play out with your money? Because even the idea of, like, Katie was saying, freedom, right? It's a huge value, right? Well, it means so many things to me. It means so many things to a lot of people. But what is that? How does that play out in your money? So, like, Charlie, my husband, and I both have freedom, but that looks differently for us. For him, it's like he talks about when he was growing up, he always told people, like, they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? He's like, I want to be retired like my grandpa. Like, that's to him what freedom means. And to me, I'm like the entrepreneur. I'm like the creative. Like, I'm like, that's not what, I mean, yes, eventually, but that's not what freedom means. Like, there's so much more that means to me right now. It means that I'm going to have the freedom to start a new business, to go buy blocks, to sell them, and that I'm going to be able to explore ideas and be creative. And so understanding even just what are your values? Mm-hmm. And it's not even just a much, even when Katie was asking, like, what are your values and how do they tie to your money? It's that what are your values? And then, like, going deeper into that conversation, because then you can really start to understand, like, more of the why and the how. Other really great money prompt questions for couples. How did your parents deal with money? What money lessons did you grow up with? What ones do you want to change? Having some of those conversations can be really, really powerful, even before you get to the numbers, because you're going to understand some of the deeper motivations. One of my favorite lines is somebody said, everybody makes sense if you dig deep enough. And so it's really like, how do we dig deep enough with our partners to really understand the why behind why they spend their money, or why they avoid their money, or why they overspend their money? There's usually a reason why. And if we can, the first step is really just recognizing it. Yeah. So I just rambled quite a bit on that.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I guess, and this is just like a comment, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm a film producer, so I have an independent film producer. So my job is it comes in waves, and then I am not working for a while. So sometimes that type of lifestyle, and my partner is someone who has like a very stable job, and like security in his job, and all the benefits, blah blah blah. And so as someone who like has this like very very unstable job, and someone who does, I sometimes feel like because I have all these questions, right, about and conversations that I want to have about money, but sometimes I feel like because of my lifestyle that I don't have the authority to like make demands, I guess, or like not demands, but like say like, oh, we should put this money into like a savings, or we should do this with that money, because it's like, well, you don't even know where your like next gig is going to come from, so why should you even have this conversation, right? And so so I guess I feel sometimes like a little bit insecure to have those conversations because of the instability of my job. And it's interesting because for my partner, his sister has like also tries to have these conversations with him about Roth IRAs and high interest savings account and things like that, because she has all of those things, but she also has a stable job. And it's almost like he seems to listen to her a little bit more just because of where she's coming from than to me, because I like it's like very touch and go with jobs. I don't know, I'm wondering if you ever dealt with couples who have like different, very different lifestyles when it comes to their professional lives, and how, I don't know, how to like have a better conversation around money or for the couple that's like that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, so many things there. And I'm sure Katie's like, oh, I love it. I'm like, well, okay, number one, like, you are absolutely like able to have those conversations. Like, and it is like don't ever shy away from them. That's so one of the things that when you were talking, one of the things that came to mind was seeking to understand like more of like what he was doing. You're talking about the security. I heard that a couple times in there. Mm-hmm. I would be curious to know from him, what does security mean? What does security mean for you? Have some of those conversations, and not just like security, it could be like, what does financial security look like for you? What would that mean? What would, you know, how does he view your job? And you maybe have had those conversations, but what would be words that he would describe for what you're bringing from like a financial standpoint? And really kind of dive into some of that, because I think a lot of times and Heidi's probably done a lot of work on this, but like the stories we tell ourselves, I think, you know, getting clarity around that. One of the, my husband and I just went to, we were working with a marriage coach. She specializes in business owners, like bless her. But she was, one of the things that she said to me that was just so powerful was there's two types of conversations. Well, I'm sure there's lots of types, but we have conversations for understanding, and then there's conversations where we're trying to make decisions. And rarely do they go together well. Mm-hmm. And so her point for me was always, you know, let's have those conversations for understanding. You're not trying to win an argument. You're not trying to like get the money to go into a certain thing. Your conversation is truly just to understand. And you know, so it's, you know, so like questions that could come up, you know, obviously the financial security, what does this mean to you? Like really, like what's the narrative that he's telling about your work and your job? Because in his mind, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I identify as kind of a creative person, and I'm like, your job sounds amazing. Like, you know, with all the things like that you get to do, and like so many people would love that lifestyle. So I have no idea. But then it could also be, even you're talking about like Roth IRAs, like, you know, what seeking for understanding on that could just be like, have you ever considered a Roth IRA? Do you know of anybody who's had one? Like, what are your thoughts about that? And you're not trying to convince them of anything. You're just really trying to understand what he knows, what his thoughts are. It's really just your whole posture is about curiosity, because I think if you can understand that, then it's going to make those other conversations when you're trying to make a decision with him a lot more effective.
I love that so much. And yes, I would totally agree. Like, you're coming from a place of curiosity rather than a place of like, here's what we should be doing, or questioning, or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. And then, you know, act as if you both were dating for the first time, right? And you're asking him questions about like what his favorite color is. Not that most of us are asking those questions on first dates, but, you know, in kind of in those terms, right? You're asked, but you're, you know, just a little bit deeper in a deeper way around finances.
Yeah, anytime I hear the word should, like, oh, we should be doing this, that's an immediate shame trigger for like most of the population out there. Mm-hmm. And so anytime we do that, you're immediately like, it's just this immediate response. And so as much as we can avoid any like, hey, here's what I think we should do, you know, there's ways to get to that, even though you're like, come on, y'all, like this might seem obvious, but.
Thank you.
So I don't know if that's answering the question, but
those are like really helpful things for sure.
It's hard, and it's hard being in, you know, it's hard being in a relationship and then throwing money. It's number one, being in a relationship can be hard, and then throwing money on top of it makes it even harder. And, you know, one of the things that also we work with a lot of couples, and one of the things that's been really interesting is that every couple does it a little bit different. So, you know, there's not this one size fits all on how you do your money. It's really figuring out like, how do you operate around money? And then how does your partner operate around money? And then what's that dance look like for you guys? I work with a lot of clients who are like 65 looking at retiring, and younger ones too, but it's really interesting because I always ask them like, what's your money system? What does this look like? And everybody does it a little bit differently. And that's not like I think that's actually something to celebrate, because I'm like, that means that they found something that works. It's noting when there's resentment, noting when there's, you know, I mean, hopefully it's just like anger, you know, there's a lot of emotions that can come out, but like being able to recognize those is really important. But don't be afraid if it looks different than other people, you know, because that's actually very normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and something to consider is working with a professional, right? Because,
Yeah.
it makes those conversations a little bit easier when there's somebody else that's not you telling your partner, how to do certain things or what to do or where that conversation can go. And then you can also save those conversations for when you're
Yeah.
meeting with somebody.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's so true. Even we have a lot of clients who like they're trying to get their parents to like do a will. Like, come on, mom, you have to do a will. And there's just resistance. I don't know why. It's probably some psychology, something or other. But you'll bring in a financial planner and they'll be like, oh yeah, I need to do a will. What do I need to do for that? And the kids are just like, are you kidding me? Like we've fought about this. And it's just sometimes that extra voice.
Exactly. Yep. Well, thank you so much for your time, Hannah. And thank you for
Yes.
everyone's questions. This was so great. And hopefully we can have more conversations like this, in the future.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me, Katie. And I just love the work that you're doing. It's so needed, and I just love it. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you're doing too. It really matters.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I love the work that you're doing too.
Thanks.
It's so great. Thank you.